Hello, everyone. I'm Talaya Dendy, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Today, our very special guest is Dr. Jane Fitch. Dr. Jane is a holistic cancer coach. She has a PhD in holistic health and over 25 years of experience. She combines whole food nutrition and holistic practices, including hypnotherapy, guided meditation, aromatherapy, energy healing, and personal coaching to support, empower, and love her clients. Dr. Jane was diagnosed with cervical cancer in 2011, and she joins us today to share her experience and wisdom. Dr. Jane, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Well, thank you, Talaya. Thank you so much. I am very blessed to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Jane. I'm honored to have you. I know your schedule's really busy, but before we really dive in, Dr. Jane, I would love to know, how are you feeling today?
I am feeling great. I am feeling very good. You know, when you come through cancer, they talk a lot about that new normal.
Mhm.
And so my new normal is I feel great and I'm blessed and happy to be here.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that. And yes, you hear new normal a lot, and you're like, well, what is that? But that's the point. You have to figure out what your new normal will be.
That's right.
Dr. Jane, please tell the listeners what you do as a certified holistic health practitioner and holistic health coach, and also what motivates you to do this important work.
Well, let me start first by saying what motivates me to do this work is as a cancer survivor and a holistic health practitioner, I feel that it benefited me, holistic practices benefited me when I was going through treatment. And it wasn't a very big thing at that time. I think the integrative therapies have become a little bit more acceptable to go along with traditional treatment. But I have been a holistic health practitioner now for over 25 years. And when I started in it, I was working with people with a lot of chronic illnesses. Didn't really expect that I would be included in that group of chronic or of illness, you know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the things that I do as a holistic health practitioner were very effective and beneficial going over in and working with cancer survivors. And I just knew, I think I knew when I first went in for my very first chemotherapy appointment, I knew that if I survived this treatment, that I wanted to be able to help other women in particular deal with these things, body, mind, spirit, all of that as a whole. And so after I finished with my treatment and really started thinking and figuring out things, it just sort of made sense that, hey, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to focus on. And it was such a divine moment, I guess you'd say, because for 25 years, I've been kind of going, what avenue do I want to go down? Where, because I just feel like it's something that's greatly needed for cancer survivors.
Yes.
And having the experience of going through cancer myself, it just made sense.
Yeah,
So,
it's a beautiful match, a much needed match. And thank you so much for what you do. It is
oh,
really
thank you.
important. And a lot of people are not even aware of what's available to them. And not only what's available, but what's possible with this
Yeah.
kind of support.
Yeah,
So I think that's very important for people to
absolutely.
realize that.
Absolutely. Yeah, here in the United States, of course, we have Western medicine, and Western medicine is very focused on the physical, what is wrong with you, and then trying to figure out what we need to do about it. And when I was going through my treatment, everything was focused on the tumor that I had and getting rid of the cancer. I was never asked how I felt emotionally, although I was a big crybaby and
Mhm.
I cried all the time. And a lot of times my doctors really didn't know what to do with me because I just start crying, and it's a very emotional thing, but no
Yeah.
one really ever addressed that other than going and getting a social worker, which really wasn't what I needed.
Mhm.
But that's what they had available.
Yeah.
And nobody really looked at the different aspects of what I am, body, mind, and spirit. So I think that when you use those, and I don't ever tell people not to have traditional treatment.
Mhm.
I think that you can have traditional treatment and you can use integrative therapies, is what it's called. Integrative therapies, it's called that for a reason.
Mhm.
And so you can use these in conjunction with the traditional treatments, which is
Yeah.
what I did, and you can have a great outcome.
I agree. And it doesn't have to be a and or, it can be a both and. And
Yes,
sometimes it's presented as a standalone thing, and then that
exactly.
causes controversy. But no, you can do them together. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
pointing that out.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I don't ever want to tell someone that, oh, don't you go have chemo, don't you go have radiation. And I did have a number of colleagues that were a little not really happy with me
Mm.
that I did traditional treatment, but I was kind of in a life or death situation. And really, I think that that's a personal decision that someone needs to make, just like with all of the things that I do with people. I tell them that you are very intuitive with
Mhm.
your body and what you need. And my job is to provide you with information and options and a variety of different things. And then you make the decision on what you want to include, not include, makes no difference. Now, I do tell people that if there's something that I really think you need to do, I will tell you that. I work very intuitively, and sometimes something will come that says, hey, so and so needs to do this or this or this. And I'm like, okay, I'm the messenger, and here you go. Take it for what it's worth. But if I really think somebody needs to do something, I will tell them.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's like, do what you feel empowered to do, not just because somebody else says, hey, do this. Right.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I like to give people the options of choosing what they want to do with their own body. I mean, it's their
Mhm.
body.
I agree. I have one more question, Dr. Jane, before we transition into your diagnosis. And that question is, how can people tap into their intuition?
Mm,
Sometimes people may say, I'm being told to listen
mhm,
to my intuition, to be intuitive. How does
mhm.
one do that in a simple way?
And that is why I do what I do and create a plan for someone that, if for example like, let's just say that you had come to me and you were wanting to use me as your holistic cancer coach, and you asked me that question, like, how can I tap into my intuition? What I would do is to take you through some guided meditation, some guided hypnosis, to get you to tap into the subconscious part of your mind, not the conscious part of your mind. Because, the conscious part of your mind, when you hear you have cancer, the conscious part of your mind goes, oh my God, what is going on here? But when you get into the subconscious mind, you get a lot more clarity and you get a lot more answers as to what you may need to do. And you also give your body the support and the tools that it needs to start to heal itself, because consciously sometimes we get in our own way.
Mhm.
We get in our own way, and so we don't want to do that, especially when we're going through treatments. you know Very quickly, one of the things that I don't really like to hear is that people are fighting cancer. Oh,
Yeah.
they're oh, she's just fighting this, he's fighting that. I never fought at all.
Right.
I was a basket case. Like, I just showed up whenever they told me and showed up wherever they told me to go. And I always think, well, so does that mean that if someone doesn't survive, does that mean that they didn't fight hard enough?
Right.
So I don't like that word. And I feel that it's much more powerful and healing to work with your subconscious, to work with affirmations, to work with visualizations, so that your body is much more powerful than you think it is, and your
Mhm.
thoughts are much more powerful than you think they are. And when you get those kind of in line, then your body tends to, it starts to believe that, and it starts to heal that. And so that's where I think that having someone like me, having a holistic cancer coach, can really help, because I'm coming along beside you and I'm going to be with you to help you to do those things. And so, that intuition part is that mind part. And sometimes you have to get really quiet, and you have to get to a different level of thinking other than the conscious way that you're thinking. you have
Mhm.
to get you have to get deeper, and so the best way to do that is through meditation and hypnosis.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And what I heard you say was that it's really important to lean on your intuition so you can better coexist with
Absolutely.
cancer. And that way the healing
Absolutely.
starts. Yes.
Absolutely, because we look at it as this horrible thing. And I remember when I was first diagnosed and I'd come home from the hospital, and it was before my treatment ever started. And one of my very best friends came over to see me, and I could tell when I looked at her that she had fear all over her face.
Mhm.
And she looks at me and she said, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" And I said, "Well, no, right now I feel like I know what's wrong." And just like if you had a heart condition or diabetes, once you know what your diagnosis is, then you start, okay, what do I need to do to create a plan to get better?
Mhm. Mhm.
So
That's right.
it cancer these days is not as much of a death sentence as it used to be, but still, I think, you have to do your part.
Mhm.
You have to co-create with it.
That's right. Let's talk now, Dr. Jane, about your diagnosis. How did you learn that you had cervical cancer, and what were some of the symptoms you were experiencing?
Well, I had started to have pelvic pain and some lower back pain, kind of
Mm,
like when you have menstrual cramps, that kind of
okay.
thing, although
Yeah.
wasn't having a period at that point. And that went on for a while. And but I didn't equate that really with anything. I didn't really know what it had to do with. And at the very end of May in 2011, my husband and I had gone out. We'd gone out for a walk, and we came back in, and all of a sudden I started bleeding massively, like hemorrhaging kind of bleeding.
Wow.
And I thought that it had to do with menopause.
Okay.
So, I mean, I didn't know. So I just kind of ignored it. Well, it went on for 4 days. And
Wow.
and I'm talking massive, massive amounts of bleeding. So finally, on the fourth day, my husband had gone out. We had a business, and he had gone to do something for that. And I sent him a text message and I said, I think you need to call 911.
Oh,
I went in the
wow.
bathroom and I sat down on the toilet, and then the next thing you know, I completely passed out. He had already called 911 and the ambulance guys got there and it was so embarrassing. Well, I was out of it. I mean, I was out, but they had come in my house. They're all dressed in their big fire uniforms and stuff and take
Mm.
me down the stairs. They had to strap me into a little bed thing, went to the emergency room, and they didn't know. They didn't have any idea what was going on. And they admitted me. And I had to have a catheter because I kept passing out every time I tried to stand up because I'd lost so much blood.
Yeah.
And so I remember at one point there was a GYN doctor who had come in there, and I asked her, like, what's wrong? And she said, well, I don't know, but you're going to have to be checked out, go to an outpatient clinic and let them figure out what's wrong.
Hmm.
So there's your red flag number one with doctor kind of things.
Mhm.
But a nurse had heard her say that, and my husband had also heard her say that. And they contacted the head of the GYN department there at the hospital. And he came in to see me later and he said, Jane, he said, I don't want you to worry. He said, we don't know what it is, but you're not going anywhere. We're going to figure it out.
Mhm.
So they ended up taking me in to try to do a DNC, and that still didn't stop the bleeding.
Hmm.
So they had to call a specialist in to cauterize everything. And I woke up in ICU. The surgeon was sitting beside me and he told me that I had cervical cancer. I had a tumor that was a little over 10 centimeters.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, they think that I'd had this tumor for 3 years.
Wow.
Yes. So I was in ICU for a couple of days and then in the regular room for a couple more days, eventually went home. And then I guess it was probably about 10 days, 2 weeks later, I started my treatment.
Okay. So pretty fast once they figured out what it was. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And with cervical cancer, there's a window of days, and I don't remember offhand exactly what those days. I think it's like 56 days or something like that, that they want to try to get all of your treatment in those days.
Okay.
And so they weren't going to wait around, but I had 36 external radiation. I had 6 chemo treatments. I went to the hospital for almost a week with the internal radiation where they implant radiation rods
Oh,
right up
wow.
next to the tumor. And I had 17 blood transfusions.
Wow.
So, yeah, throughout the course of my treatment. So I was in the hospital a lot,
Yes.
dehydrated, I lost 40 pounds in about 6 weeks. I wish it was that easy now, but, you know,
In a good way,
in a
you
good
know.
way, exactly. I don't think I want to go through that again, but it was brutal. I will just say it was a brutal treatment. My body didn't like it at
I
all.
bet. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Jane, was there any explanation of what could have contributed to cervical cancer? Or is it one of those things, where it's like, well, we're not sure?
So, cervical cancer is one of the cancers that is caused by the HPV virus.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
HPV is a virus that probably 85% or more of sexually active adults will have at one time or another in their life. Almost everyone has it. And most people will clear it. However, there is a small percentage of people who don't clear it and it turns into cancer. Now, with cervical cancer, of course, women have pap tests, and
Mhm.
a pap test is a screening for cervical cancer. Now they will do not only the pap test for that, but also for HPV. They'll do the pap test for HPV. HPV is something that contributes to cervical cancer, but it also contributes to other cancers that affect not only women, but men as well. And throat cancer is one of those, which throat cancer has now overtaken cervical cancer.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that I am very passionate about is educating and making both boys and girls aware of the HPV vaccine, which is the only HPV vaccine is the only vaccine for HPV related cancers. So
Mhm.
it is very effective. You would start ideally with a younger girl or boy, somewhere around the age of 12.
Mhm.
However, you can have the vaccine up to the age of 45 now. They actually have extended that time. And so it's not quite as effective, obviously, as if you had it younger, but it's very important to have those conversations with people, men, girls, boys, everyone, to make sure that they are protected, because where they are in countries where they are giving that vaccine, overall incidences of cancer, particularly cervical cancer, has just dropped to almost nothing.
Oh, wow.
Nothing. So it's one cancer that can be eliminated. I mean, it's the only cancer where we can screen for it
Mhm.
with pap test. It's There is an anal pap test that can test for HPV. So that's important that people understand that as well. But HPV is the biggest. 98%,
Mhm.
98% of cervical cancers are caused by HPV.
Mhm.
Now, I, being a holistic health practitioner, was a little bothered by the fact that I got cancer. Like,
Of
what do
course.
you mean?
Yeah.
I got cancer? How's that possible?
Mhm.
And so when I got through all my treatment and kind of came back to the real world, I started researching, because I am a research junkie. That's what I love to do. I love that.
Mhm.
And I want to know things for myself. I don't just take things at face value. Like, I want to
Right.
know, okay, there's got to be some other explanations. And so some of the things that most people know that cause cervical cancer is smoking and multiple sexual partners, which is actually not necessarily true, but let's just keep that in mind. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, if you're having sex at all, then you have the potential of developing HPV, the
Mhm.
cancer that goes along with that. But what I wasn't really familiar with, a couple of things that I found, was stress, which, well, now I know, and most people know, I think, that stress is responsible for a lot of different illnesses
Yes.
and chronic conditions.
Mhm.
And so, and who's not under stress? But
Right.
it's
Right.
it's how you deal with the stress that makes a difference. And so then the one that really got me was when I saw that a lack of fruits and vegetables are responsible for causing cervical cancer. And then the more I started researching that, the more I started learning that, well, it's not just cervical cancer, but it's cancer overall, and heart disease
Yes.
and diabetes. So, Talaya, I had to really look in the mirror,
Mhm.
and I had to ask myself, are you really getting what you need diet wise?
Yes. Something you can control.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And I had to kind of face the music. It was one of those come to Jesus meetings, like, well, I learned a lot. Let's just say that. I learned a lot about how much you really need, the kinds of things that you really need, the kinds of fruits and vegetables. And really, I discovered how important they are in just prevention, prevention overall,
Mhm.
not just when you get sick, but building your immunity. And which is why I think that having cancer and realizing that just made the work that I do, it was like a perfect marriage.
Mhm.
And so obviously prevention is way easier. And what I used to say was, I want to prevent you from having to
Right.
go through what I had to go through. So I try to do a lot of education with girls in particular and women, because cervical cancer is not a delicate thing to have to deal with. It's very invasive. Like, if you have any kind of modesty around all that,
That's
it
right.
kind of goes away. So it's an intrusive kind of treatment. It's not
Mhm.
fun at all. But not that
Yeah.
any cancer treatment is, it's all bad.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like, so many things were going through my mind when you were sharing your experience. And that has to be very tough, especially if you're a very private person. And then
Mhm.
assuming that it impacts your sexual function, that's not talked about a lot with like cervical cancer, male, female
Right.
cancers, is just not discussed.
That's right.
Want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so and that goes right back into that kind of mental and emotional part as well, because when you're dealing with GYN cancers, whether it's breast cancer or any ovarian, cervical, any of the female parts, if you will, there's a lot of emotion in that diagnosis, especially like I had a radical hysterectomy at the end of my treatment, which I was very fortunate because they normally don't do that with my stage of cancer. But do you know that not one person, not one oncologist, I had a team of 4 oncologists,
Mhm.
and not one oncology doctor, not one nurse, not one social worker ever said, so how are you feeling
Yeah.
as a woman? How are you feeling? How are you dealing with that? Because there were moments when I would go through and think, well, gosh, all my female parts are gone. So,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
what's going on? And it changes everything so dramatically, especially when, obviously, when you have a hysterectomy and you're put right into menopause, which I kind of feel like I was there. Maybe I don't know, with a tumor being what it was and being there for as long as it was, I don't
Mhm.
know that for sure that I was in menopause. But after the hysterectomy, obviously I was. But it's a huge emotional component that is never discussed. And I mean, it's part of who you are as a woman. It's what makes you a woman. So I'm thinking, geez, am I really still a woman? Like,
Yeah,
that's,
that's
I mean,
valid.
everything that made me a woman, except for here, is gone. It
And
can be tough.
yeah, and I was thinking about this too. It's tough for some people to just talk about how they're feeling on a regular day,
Yeah.
to be
Oh, yeah.
honest about that. So no one even knows how to come at a conversation like that. And then
Right.
also, Dr. Jane, it's invisible.
Yes.
So a lot of people can't even make the connection. Like, if you have a
Mhm.
bruise or something, you can see that it's
Right.
visible. You can talk
Right.
about, well, that looks like it hurts, or,
Right.
but
Exactly.
what you went through was invisible
Right.
to a certain degree.
Right. And when you get physically hurt and it
Mhm.
heals,
Right.
you don't really think about it so much. I mean, women that have babies, I mean, it's so funny. My adult son, a couple weeks ago, I was asking me about, did you have really, really bad pain when you gave birth? Like, was it the worst pain you've ever had in your life? And then he wanted to know which was worse, him or his brother. And I was like, well, I don't really remember which one of you. I remember kind of what went up to it, but I don't really remember that exactly. And kind of the same thing with my cancer. Like, I can remember how bad, I know that I had really bad pain. And I know
Mhm.
that, especially with the internal radiation, it was really bad. But I think that the emotional pain lasted much, the actual emotional pain lasted way longer than the physical pain.
Was that the hardest part of your experience? Is that what I'm hearing you say, that the emotional
I
pain was the
I would,
hardest part?
yeah, I would,
Okay.
well, yes, to some extent, I would say that's true because I was, girl, when I tell you I was out of it, like I was
Mm,
out of it. Like I sometimes I explain it like I was like disconnected from a physical world.
yeah.
I had someone drive me every day to the hospital for my treatments. Every time I had to go and do something, someone had to take me. Other than that, I was pretty much laying on the bed or mindlessly watching TV,
Mhm.
just not. I didn't answer my phone for 6 months. I didn't get on Facebook. I didn't get on my computer. I did nothing, nothing.
But you did. You
But I
did.
did. Yes, I
Mhm.
did.
Yes, you
I
did.
I did a lot of visualization. I did a lot of affirmation. I I cried a lot. I yelled at God a lot. Those kind of things. But it, it, it's just and it's just, to me, it's like something you just kind of have to go through. But what I do now is like I don't want someone to be alone to have to go through that. I know when I was talking to this girl that I was telling you about earlier, this other cervical cancer survivor, she said I had no support. Like I didn't I there was no one to talk to other than your doctors.
Mm,
But what are they going to tell you? I mean, they're great, and oncology doctors and oncology nurses are the best. They are
mhm.
fabulous.
Yeah.
But it's not the same thing. It wasn't until I went to a retreat and met a couple of other cervical cancer survivors, and we're talking about all these different physical things and mental things going on, and like, oh my gosh, that's me too. Like I can identify with that. And so
Mhm.
having that experience and going through that experience, I think I kind of come at it from a different viewpoint than your medical team would. And I have the benefit and the experience and the knowledge to throw in some other great holistic things that are fantastic.
Well-rounded is what we call
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
I
that's
think so.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this, Dr. Jane. You told me in a previous conversation that your husband was phenomenal.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of women who do
Mhm.
not have that.
That's
They're
true.
not blessed with that.
That's true.
They are either married or in relationships and they get something like cervical cancer, breast
Yep.
cancer, and they disappear.
Yep. They sure do.
What advice do you have for those women who are crying because of their diagnosis? You just said it. You went through so many different emotions, pain, all
Mm-hmm.
these things, and
Mm-hmm.
it was hard for you, which is very, very valid. And
Mm-hmm.
you had the support of your husband. What do
Yes.
you have to say to women who don't have their husbands, boyfriends have left?
Yes. And that is so tragic. And I have seen that over and over and over again. And it's just, it really breaks my heart. And I think that if you're in a situation like that, it's even more important that you reach out and try and find someone somewhere to connect with. And with technology and the internet the way that it is today, see, it wasn't really like that so much when I was going through treatment. I mean, yes, I don't know, it wasn't the dark ages, but there just wasn't as many groups and individual people to connect with. Now I know that there are, and they're becoming much more vocal and much more visible. So talk to your doctors and say, hey, I need to connect with someone. We work hand in hand with the hospitals and the GYN doctors and the oncology doctors to let them know, hey, we're here as support. This is what I say to people. And I think that this is extremely important is, and I don't care who it is in your circle. If you are going through cancer, You want to have the most positive people around you. You do not want people who are negative, people who are not supportive. You don't want them around you. They can come back in your life later when you're better, but when you're going through the treatment that you go through, you need to have everything being positive, being positive words, positive energy, because energy is so important. And I know it's a lot of people don't like that. They're like, what am I supposed to do? Just kick somebody out? Well, they're either going to have to change and be more positive, or yes, you're going to have to go somewhere else, or they're going to have to go somewhere else, because you cannot, your life depends upon it. Your life depends upon the positiveness of the energy and the thoughts and everything that goes into your treatment, because the treatment should not just be around chemo, radiation, and surgery. That should not be the totality of your treatment.
I agree. There's so many other parts of it.
Oh, yes.
So many other parts,
Oh,
but we're taught to just focus on
yes,
the medical piece, the
exactly.
treatments, the
Exactly.
doctor's appointments, and all that. And it's like, well, what's going on when you're not at those doctor's appointments? What's going on when you're not in treatment?
And that's why I like to really educate people and work with people around food in particular. Is I tell them, I said, well, your doctor, your oncology team, and they're fabulous. They're fabulous. But they're focusing on one thing. They're focusing on that tumor or that area of your body that is sick, right? But you have all these other things going on in your body. You have all these other organs and systems and cells and things that are going on, and they're working even harder now because they're being poisoned by the same poison that's trying to kill the cancer, but they're being subjected to that as well, and they're working overtime, and they're going, hey, what about me? Why aren't you taking care of me too? Right?
It's so true.
And I will tell you, I've heard so many people say this, and I would think, I bet you that they probably may have said the same thing to you. When I was losing all this weight and I was so nauseous, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, it was horrible. And my chemo oncology doctor wanted me to meet with a nutritionist. And I'm thinking, well, it's not that I don't know what to eat, it's that I can't eat. And what they would tell me is just eat whatever you can.
Yes.
You drink whatever you can. Go get you some Gatorade. Go get you some Ensure. Whatever you can eat. Just whatever. Just eat whatever it is. Well, that's not good advice.
No,
It's not good advice.
not at all.
So I knew what I was supposed to do. That wasn't really the problem.
Yeah.
So,
You know, you said something earlier about supporting your body. And the more I hear you talk, what I'm hearing you say, well, what I know for sure is that the body wants to heal.
oh,
But,
absolutely.
when you're supporting your body in the process of healing, you got to take care of your mind too.
Oh,
Yeah, and
oh,
so
oh, absolutely.
that's been the common theme throughout our conversation is that
Absolutely.
mind-body connection. Yes, yes, and that's where it sounds like you do a lot of great work. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And a lot of times what manifests physically
Mhm.
has been going on up here in your head way longer than this manifestation of what this illness is, right?
Mhm.
You don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and you have cancer. You don't just wake up
Right.
one day and have heart disease. And with that combination of stress and environmental conditions, and I definitely want to make sure to point this out, that approximately 85% or more of cancer is not genetic, it is caused by our environment, what we
Yeah.
eat, what we think, what we feel, our the things we put on our skin, our cleaning products, everything. Environmental is the most common thing in developing all diseases, but in particular cancer. It's not genetic. Our body doesn't have a cancer gene necessarily, right, that you're just going to wake up one day and have cancer. It didn't work that way.
It's at least 10 years in the making, at least
Oh, I
10
would say
years.
so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great point. As we start to wind down, Dr. Jane, I want to touch on a couple things that I think are very important. You just mentioned, kind of the general theme of cancer and
Mhm.
what people should be aware of, which is environmental, the things we put on our skin. Something else I wanted to ask you was, when you are working with women diagnosed with cervical cancer,
Mhm.
are there any common themes that you notice about those women? And what I mean by that is, have you noticed that a lot of them have had trauma, or maybe they were going through something difficult before the diagnosis? Have you
Mhm.
noticed any common themes like that?
I do think that that is a common theme. And you remember earlier I said that stress was such a major factor. And I
Mhm.
think that when you combine stress and improper nutrition, we'll say improper nutrition, when you combine those two things in particular, I think you will see, you will have a much more likely environment for the body to not clear the HPV virus.
Your internal environment is
It
important.
really
Mhm.
is. And and I look at my own situation, and I can tell you that the 3 years that they say that that tumor had started to grow, I was under probably the most stress that I'd ever been in my life. So it wasn't very surprising to me. And I think that, again, that prevention thing is so critical. So, prevention by eating better, prevention by dealing with stress better. And like I said, we all have stress, everybody has stress. It's how you deal with it. It's how you deal with it, how you see it. And I think that if it's challenging for you to deal with those things on your own, get help with someone who can help you deal with those things and educate you on those things. It's out there. I mean, we have all this information at our fingertips now. So there's no excuse, really, in my opinion, especially with cervical cancer, because you'd be amazed how many women don't get pap tests.
Yes.
So catching it early is
Yes.
critical,
Mhm.
critical. So getting those regular tests is very, very important.
Quickly before I move on to my next question, because I thought about this too. I think sometimes women get confused in thinking that a pap test can determine if someone has ovarian cancer.
Right. And it
Those
does.
two are kind of confused sometimes, I've learned.
Yes,
Mhm.
it is. And ovarian cancer, there's no way to detect that. And the symptoms are usually so silent that you don't really know until it's too late.
Mhm.
Now, I want to say something very, very important. And this has to do with ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, any kind of thing that is going on with your body that feels not right. Okay. And that's using your intuition. It feels not
Mhm.
right. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor kind of brushes it off like, oh, that's no big deal. Or,
Mhm.
oh, well, maybe it's this, and we'll just pay attention, just watch it for 6 months or whatever it is. Okay. If you don't feel that that is accurate, you keep going until you find someone who will give you the answer to the problem. I have known so many women who have gone through doctor after doctor after doctor only to be told there's nothing wrong with you. You're making it up in your head,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then and there was a case not too long ago, it was just a few months ago. I read about a girl, I want to say she was a some kind of influencer, I don't know, Instagram, TikTok, I don't know. And kind of that same situation,
Mm-hmm.
they had kind of misdiagnosed her. Well, when she was finally diagnosed, she had stage 4 cervical cancer and she died relatively soon after that. What I tell people all the time, doctors work for you, not the other way around. It's your body. And if you are not getting the answers that you need, that you're like, that doesn't feel right. I think there's something else going on here. You keep going until you get the answer that you need, that you feel comfortable with, and that perhaps saves your life.
Great advice. Dr. Jane, you are the chapter lead for the Charlotte National Cervical Cancer Coalition.
Yes, I
Please,
am.
number one, tell us what that is
Okay.
and what you hoping to accomplish as the chapter lead.
So the National Cervical Cancer Coalition is sort of a grassroots part of the American Sexual Health Association, or ASHA. And it's been around for a long time. There are chapter leaders in not every state, but a lot of states. And we all kind of have little different things that we do. My particular area of focus is really around education and awareness,
Mhm.
and going in and educating groups, boys and girls, on HPV, the importance of the vaccination. In fact, I did a series of videos with my oldest son who had the HPV vaccine when he went to college. And we did a series of videos for a nationwide organization that's in Washington that deals with young men, and to talk a little bit about why boys need the vaccine and why they are reluctant to get the vaccine, because nobody's really talking to them.
Mhm.
So that's sort of my area of focus. And then also to support any local cervical cancer survivors, just to support them in their journey as well, but mostly around education and awareness.
Wonderful. Where can people find you, Dr. Jane, if they're interested in talking with you more about your work or, getting support from the
Absolutely.
National Cervical Cancer
Yes.
Coalition?
So you can go online to the National Cervical Cancer Coalition, just Google that. And then there's a little drop down with the different chapters. I'm in the Charlotte chapter, and I have a special page with an email address and a phone number. You can also email me directly at drjfitch1@gmail.com. And I am available to answer questions or talk to them about their particular situation, whatever is needed.
You are such a wealth of information, Dr. Jane. I appreciate you so
Well,
much.
thank you.
What you do is so important. You are making a huge difference.
Thank
And
you.
I just want women to see and hear what is possible, even though you have faced cervical cancer. If you
Yes.
just got that diagnosis, just know that you can make it through. Make sure you get the right support and the education.
Yep. Let's have a conversation about it.
That's right. And finally, Dr. Jane, if you could have a conversation with cervical cancer, what would you say in 1 to 2 sentences?
If I could have a conversation with cervical cancer itself,
Yes. Mhm.
oh boy, I'd be like, why?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to me? I don't have time for this. You need to go away. That's my thing. Go
Mhm.
away. That's what I'd
Yes.
like to say. Go away, which is kind of what I did.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah.
what I did in my
Okay.
treatment. Like, go away. I don't have time for you. You are
Yeah.
not welcome here.
Hmm. That's fair. I want want to pose a reflection question to the audience before we end. Cervical cancer is a lesser discussed cancer. What did you learn from this conversation that can help yourself or someone else? Again, what did you learn from our conversation today that can help you or someone else that has been facing or has gotten a diagnosis of cervical cancer? Dr. Jane, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom. I will have all of your information in the listen notes so that women can reach out to you if they have questions and are seeking support.
That's great. And thank you for what you do. It's amazing what you do.
Thank you.
You do a great
Thank
job.
you.
So
Oh,
thank
Dr.
you.
Jane.
Thank you for
Thank
including
you.
me in your work that you do. I am deeply grateful for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that coming from you and all the wisdom and knowledge that you have around health and healing. Take care, Dr. Jane. Keep up your great work. I will definitely share all of your information in the listen notes. And I am so excited for people to get all that you have to offer.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I would like to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share, follow, or subscribe so that you can easily find this podcast and listen again. You can listen to Navigating Cancer Together on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with cancer, get your free guided meditation at ontheotherside.life/guided meditation. Again, that's ontheotherside.life/guided meditation. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I hope you found it helpful. Please be sure to subscribe, share, and tell your friends and family about it. For notes from the show and previous episodes, visit ontheotherside.life and check out the podcast section. I would love it if you join me for the next episode. Talk to you soon.